Welcome to Insights. I'm Adam Rivers.
And I'm Sarah Collins. In this episode, we'll reflect carefully on the Qur'an verse by verse, focusing on wording, context, and coherence.
It is really good to be back, and frankly, I've been really looking forward to this specific conversation because of exactly where we left off last time.
Yeah, it's a big transition point.
It really is.
Yeah.
Because if you've been following along with us, we just finished reflecting on what is arguably the central plea of the entire opening surah. That's verse 6, guide us to the straight path, or Idina al-Sirat al-Mustaqim.
Right.
And it's that moment of, total vulnerability, asking the divine for direction. But today we are kind of parking the car, turning off the engine, and looking exclusively at the answer to that exact request. We're zooming in on the final verse of Al-Fatiha, verse 7.
It really is the grand finale of the surah, and it's so important to visualize this on the page or even just listen to it in the recitation.
Yeah, the flow of it.
Exactly. We don't just stop at guide us to the straight path. The revelation flows immediately into verse 7. The path of those upon whom you have bestowed favor, not of those who have evoked your anger or of those who are astray. It's a very specific, very descriptive conclusion.
And that connection, that immediate link between verse 6 and verse 7, that is actually exactly where I want to start today.
Okay, let's unpack that.
Because looking at the structure here, there's this beautiful image of the recitation flowing almost like an exhale right after an inhale. It's not really a new sentence, it's a direct continuation.
That's a really great way to put it. Think about the experience of the person who is actually praying. You have just made this massive, weighty request. Guide us. You've asked for the Siyad al-Mustaqim, the straight path.
Right, you're asking for the ultimate direction.
And immediately, without a single pause, the Qur'an defines it. It doesn't leave you hanging. It doesn't leave the definition of straight up to your own imagination. It immediately locks in the meaning. And that lack of a gap, that speed, is crucial.
It's almost like the Qur'an is preventing any ambiguity from even having the chance to creep in.
Precisely.
But why is that speed so important? I mean, usually when you ask a really big question in life, you expect a pause. You expect some deliberation. Why does the answer have to rush in like that?
Well, think about the anxiety of silence. If you ask someone, say a mentor, am I on the right track with my life? And they just stare at you for 10 seconds, what happens to your brain?
Oh, I start panicking immediately.
Right.
I start filling in the blanks with my worst insecurities. I just assume I'm failing miserably.
Exactly. The silence is where the anxiety lives. By connecting the request, guide us immediately to the definition, the path of those. The revelation bridges that gap instantly. It's what grammarians call an appositive structure.
Where the second phrase basically just renames the first one without a break. Right?
Yes. It tells the human heart, don't worry, we aren't leaving this open to interpretation.
That brings up a really interesting point about our psychology. Why is that immediate, rigid definition so necessary? Because, and I think you and everyone listening can probably relate to this, if you just left it at straight path, the human ego is pretty incredibly good at hijacking that term.
Oh, absolutely. That is one of the most dangerous, subtle tricks of the ego. If the verse just stopped at straight path, think about what would inevitably happen.
Everyone would just make it up.
Every person, every group, every ideology would simply define straight as whatever it is I'm currently doing.
Right. Like I'd define the straight path as the path where I get to eat whatever I want, sleep in every day, and never have to apologize to anyone for being grumpy.
Yeah, exactly. Or a dictator would define it as the path where everyone obeys my every command without question. The person obsessed with wealth would define it as whatever maximizes their profit margins. We have this deep-seated tendency to bend definitions to fit our own comfort zones.
We really do.
And we treat the concept of truth like a mirror that just reflects what we already want to see.
So, verse 7 essentially acts as a kind of lock. It's a safeguard against that psychological manipulation. It's the Qur'an saying to the human heart, okay, you want the straight path. You don't get to define it.
You have to accept its specific name.
Yeah, it's taking the pen completely out of our hands. It says the path has a very specific signature. It is the path of those you have bestowed favor upon. And equally important, you have to actively reject the paths of those who earned anger and those who are lost. You can't just freestyle it.
And it's humbling, really, when you sit with it. It forces you to subscribe to a definition that is completely outside of your own head.
Which is the essence of surrender, isn't it?
Yes.
You are aligning yourself with a standard that is objective, not subjective. So let's get into the specifics of this standard, because this is where the wording gets really profound.
It really does.
The first phrase of verse 7 is Surat al-Latina, the path of those. And this is something I found totally fascinating as we were looking at the reflections on this verse. The path isn't described as a set of rules.
Right.
It's not some geometric line or an abstract theological theory. It is described through people.
This is one of those profound shifts that is so easy to miss if you're just reciting quickly or reading a translation casually.
Yeah, you just breeze right past it.
The verse doesn't say the path of logic or the path of strict jurisprudence or even the path of the book. It says the path of those. It anchors the entire concept of divine guidance in humanity.
Why do you think that is? Like, why pivot from high theology to essentially sociology?
Because humans are mimetic creatures.
Meaning we copy each other.
Exactly. We learn by imitation. We don't just download data like a computer, we copy behavior. If I hand you a thick manual on how to be a good person, you might memorize it, sure, but you won't necessarily embody it.
Right. Knowing the rules isn't the same as playing the game.
But if I show you a person who is actually living that goodness, someone who is patient when they're under fire, generous when they have very little, brave when they are visibly scared, you instinctively understand what the path looks like.
That makes it so much more tangible for the listener. It's not abstract anymore. It's entirely behavioral. It forces you to ask a very personal question. Do I actually want to become that type of person?
Exactly. It moves religion from a set of abstract floating beliefs into grounded character. The path creates a certain kind of human being, someone with insight, stability, mercy. And this verse is basically asking you, is that the mold you want to be poured into?
And there's another incredibly important layer to this word, those, alatina, in Arabic. It's an open pronoun.
Yes, it is.
It's not a proper noun. It doesn't mention any names. It doesn't say the path of this specific historical tribe or the path of this particular family lineage.
And that is a radical, sweeping rejection of the idea of religion as a tribal identity or an exclusive club you're just lucky enough to be born into.
That's a distinction we really need to sit with for a minute. Identity versus transformation. Because we live in a world right now that is utterly obsessed with identity labels. You know, I am this, I belong to that group.
Yes, and very often we use those labels to hide our own flaws. I can say, I am a believer, or I am of this faith community, and I might actually think that label alone saves me. I might think my family name or my cultural background acts as some sort of spiritual VIP pass.
Right, like you're grandfathered into the straight path.
But that word, alatina, confronts that delusion head on. It says, no, you cannot hide behind a label. Belonging to this path is based entirely on attributes. It's based on an inner, ongoing transformation. You are only on the path of those if you actually share the lived qualities of those.
It's not a jersey you wear. It's the game you play. Or, I guess, the life you live.
That's a perfect analogy. You can wear the jersey of a professional basketball team all day long, but if you can't dribble or shoot, the jersey doesn't miraculously make you an athlete. The Qur'an is effectively saying to us, don't show me your jersey, show me your game, show me your character.
Which leads us perfectly into the very next word. Because if we're talking about game or performance, our modern inclination is to think we get all the credit for it. I put in the work, I get the trophy.
Right, the self-made myth.
But this next word completely shifts who gets the credit. The phrase is, Sirat alatina an'amta alihim, the path of those upon whom you have bestowed favor. We're back to addressing God directly here.
This is what we can call the grammar of grace. The verb an'amta is past tense. You bestowed favor. And notice the active voice. God is the clear subject. He did the favoring. This right here is the absolute destruction of human arrogance.
Because it teaches us that guidance is a gift. Anima.
Yes, it is not a personal achievement to hang on your wall.
That is a really tough pill to swallow for the modern mindset. We love to think, I figured this out. I studied hard. I'm a highly moral person because I have incredible willpower and I made the right choices.
And the revelation cuts right through that illusion. The people on this path, the ultimate models of success, they didn't make themselves righteous in a vacuum. They were helped. They were heavily favored.
Yeah.
This phrasing forces us to acknowledge that without that external aid, without that specific divine favor, we would just be wandering in the dark.
It prevents that toxic self-sufficiency that always inevitably leads to pride. I'm good because I'm smart. No, you're on the path because you were favored.
And think about the incredible safety mechanism built into that mindset. If you truly believe your guidance is your own personal achievement, you naturally start to look down on people who aren't guided.
Of course. You judge them.
You think, why can't they just be like me? I figured it out. Why can't they? You become harsh. But if you deeply believe guidance is a favor bestowed upon you, something you didn't entirely earn, You look at others with deep compassion, and you look at your own state with profound gratitude, not pride.
I want to dig into this specific word for a second, favor or blessing, Ima. Because in our culture, if I tell you I'm blessed, I'm usually standing next to a brand new car or I just posted a picture of a promotion letter. We almost exclusively equate blessing with material success. Is that what's happening in this verse?
Not at all. The linguistic root of nima actually implies a sense of softness or ease. But in the overarching context of the Qur'an, it is absolutely not about material wealth. It is not money. It is not power or fame or status.
Because those things can actually be dangerous, right?
Exactly. We know from many other places in the Revelation that material things can actually be a fitna, a severe trial. You can have all the money in the world, the biggest house, the most power, and be completely devastatingly off the path.
So what is the blessing here then? And it's not the bank account. What exactly is the favor?
It's the internal state. It's the softness of the heart in a very hard, cynical world. The true characteristics of this specific blessing are insight, a deep peace of the heart, a commitment to justice, the courage to speak the truth when it's difficult, and immense patience.
Wow.
True wealth, in the Quranic sense, is the safety and the soundness of the path you are currently walking on.
That is a complete, fundamental redefinition of success. You could be struggling financially, you could be going through a terrifying health crisis. But if you have peace of heart, courage, and a solid connection to the divine, you were the one who's actually been favored.
Exactly. And conversely, you could be a billionaire tech mogul, but if your heart is constantly anxious, your morals are corrupt, and you're living a life of deception and isolation, you are not favored in this specific ultimate sense.
Right.
The true blessing is the ability to be a true, actualized human being, to function exactly as we were designed to function, in harmony with the Creator.
I love that list of qualities you just gave.
Yeah.
Insight, peace, justice, courage. It makes the straight path sound less like a tightrope and more like a character blueprint.
It is. It's the blueprint of the ideal human. It's not just a list of do this, don't do that. It's an invitation to become this.
Now, the verse doesn't stop with just the positive model. It immediately introduces what we might call the shadows, the boundaries of the path, not of those who evoked your anger or of those who were astray.
Yes, the Gaia, meaning not of. This defines our identity not just by what we are, but by what we are actively avoiding. And this introduces the concept of resistance into the idea of guidance.
Resistance to what?
Guidance isn't just about floating downstream in a state of Zen. It's about actively, constantly resisting specific diseases of the human heart.
Let's break down these two negative categories because the distinction here is really important. And frankly, the grammar does something very strange, very subtle here. First, we have al-Maghdubi alayhim, those who have evoked anger. But grammatically, it's in the passive voice. It literally translates more like anger is upon them.
That passive voice is a huge key to understanding this. Notice the shift. When it was about favor, it was deeply active. You bestowed favor. God is directly, actively linked to the good. But here, regarding anger, God isn't explicitly named as the subject in the Arabic phrasing. It just states a reality. Anger is upon them.
Why the change in syntax? Is it just out of politeness or reverence?
It's theological precision. It highlights the natural consequence rather than an emotional outburst. It implies that anger is a state they have entered entirely through their own deliberate choices. It's like standing in the pouring rain.
Okay.
If you walk out into a massive thunderstorm without an umbrella, wetness is upon you.
Right.
You brought it upon yourself by your position. It's the natural, inevitable result of where you chose to stand.
So who are these people? What did they actually do to get soaked in this anger? And we have to be really careful here, right? Not to just throw these labels on historical groups or people we don't like today.
Absolutely. We have to look in the mirror first. These are archetypes of human failure. The commentary explains that this category, those who earned anger, are people who explicitly knew the truth.
So it wasn't an accident.
No, the issue was not ignorance. They weren't lacking data. The issue was the will. They saw the truth, they fully recognized it. But arrogance, stubbornness, or a deep desire to protect their own social status led them to violently reject it.
That is a terrifying category to be in. It's the total corruption of the will. It's saying, I know this is right, I know this is the truth, but I'm going to do the exact opposite because it serves my ego.
It's the ego placing itself physically above the truth. Think of a renowned cardiologist who smokes a pack of cigarettes every single day.
Okay, great example.
Does that heart doctor need a lecture from you on the dangers of lung cancer or heart disease?
Definitely not. He knows way more about the lungs than the person trying to lecture him.
Exactly. His problem isn't a lack of information. It's a profound corruption of the will. He knows the absolute truth of the situation, but his immediate desire overrides that truth. Now scale that concept up to ultimate spiritual truth. Someone who clearly sees justice but chooses oppression simply because it pays better.
Wow.
That is the path of anger. It is a deliberate, hostile confrontation with reality itself.
That actually hits really close to home. Because I think, if we're being honest, we all have a little mini Maghreb inside us. You know that moment when you know you're completely wrong in an argument with your spouse or a friend, but you just double down because you don't want to lose face?
Yes, that's exactly it. That petty defensiveness is the seed of Maktab. It's prioritizing the ego over the truth. And that is exactly why the natural consequence is anger. It is a completely just response to a deliberate violation of reality.
Now contrast that with the second group mentioned in the verse.
Yeah.
Al-Dalin, the lost or the astray.
Right. This represents a completely different type of deviation. This is not the corruption of the will. This is the corruption of knowledge.
Really?
These are people who are genuinely confused. They are losing their way. They are chasing mirages in the desert. They lack a clear criterion to judge right from wrong.
So they might not even have bad intentions.
Exactly. They might even strongly believe they are doing good, but they are operating without a reliable map.
So if we simplify the two warnings, the first group, the path of anger, is fundamentally rebellious. The second group, the lost, is fundamentally confused.
Yes. One is a catastrophic failure of intention. The other is a catastrophic failure of direction.
And here's a structural question that I know a lot of reflections focus on. Why is anger mentioned before lost? Why does the verse present them in that specific sequence?
It establishes a hierarchy of danger. Arrogance and stubbornness are fundamentally structurally harder to cure than simple ignorance.
That makes total sense. You can teach someone who doesn't know.
Precisely. A lost person, someone who is just genuinely confused, can be guided if you simply hand them the knowledge. If you show them the map, they might say, oh, wow, thank you. I didn't realize I was going south instead of north, and they immediately get back on track.
But an arrogant person.
A person who already holds the map, clearly reads it, but refuses to follow it because they don't want to submit to the guide. That person requires a total breaking of the ego. That is a much deeper, much more entrenched spiritual disease.
So the revelation puts the warning first against the harder, far more dangerous trap.
Yes. And also, if you look at it historically or sociologically, the corruption of societal elites often starts with that arrogance, the path of anger, while the general masses often fall into confusion, the path of the lost. But at the end of the day, both are severe deviations from the straight path.
I want to bring this down into what we can call the psychology of deviation. Because it's so easy for you and me to listen to this and immediately picture movie villains for the anger category.
Right.
You know, the mustache-twirling bad guys who want to destroy the world.
Right.
But the reflections we've been looking at suggest this starts much, much smaller. It's much more subtle.
It always starts small. The path to evoking that anger doesn't begin with someone waking up one Tuesday and declaring, I want to be evil today.
Rarely happens.
It begins with tiny everyday arrogances. It begins with refusing to apologize when you know perfectly well you're wrong.
Ouch. Yeah, that happens a lot.
It begins with violently rejecting valid criticism at work just because it stings your pride. It begins with prioritizing your ego over the truth in a heated debate online. Every single time you choose being right over doing right, you are stepping a few inches further onto the path of al-Maghdubi alayhim.
That is such a ruthlessly practical way to look at it. We rename our faults all the time, don't we?
We absolutely do. We call our cruelty toughness. We call our rigid stubbornness being highly principled. We call our unearned arrogance confidence. This verse strips away all those comfortable little labels. It asks us to look at the ugly root. Are you submitting to truth, or are you actively fighting it?
And what about the path to being lost? How does that realistically start for the average person listening to this?
That one often begins with simple apathy. It begins with just drifting along, following the crowd. Well, everyone else is doing it this way. Everyone else is cutting this corner, so it must be fine. It is a slow, painless drift into a life totally devoid of standards.
The path of least resistance.
Exactly. And the really scary thing about being lost is the false sense of safety you get from the negative definition. You might sit there and think, well, I'm not hurting anyone. I'm not a bad person. I have generally good intentions.
Right. I pay my taxes. I don't steal.
But the verse warns us, good intentions are completely insufficient if the map you're using is wrong. You can be profoundly lost while confidently thinking you are doing good.
Like people who commit massive social injustice thinking they are actually helping the community, or people who casually spread destructive misinformation thinking they are sharing a hidden truth.
Yes, ignorance is not a valid spiritual excuse if the knowledge was readily available to you and you just didn't bother to seek it out. Drifting is, in itself, a choice.
So, the verse is essentially giving us two marching orders. Don't be arrogant, and don't be intellectually lazy. Active, humble engagement with the truth is strictly required.
Perfectly said. The straight path requires the deep humility to accept the truth, which avoids anger, and the continuous diligence to seek the truth, which avoids being lost.
Let's pivot to something a bit more hopeful, because, man, those warnings are heavy.
They are heavy.
We need some of the light that this verse offers. There's a profound theme here regarding the power of community. We touched on this briefly with the word those, but let's go deeper. The phrasing throughout this entire section is plural. Alatina, meaning those. Alayhim, meaning upon them.
It is an entirely collective framing, and this is a massive source of psychological comfort. It implies, by its very grammar, that the straight path is a shared human history. When you are asking to be on this path, you aren't asking to be a lone ranger out in the wilderness. You are actively asking to join a spiritual family.
I love that image so much. A continuous lineage of values.
It completely combats the despair of feeling like a stranger in your own life. Sometimes when you try to live by really high moral standards, absolute honesty in business, real integrity in relationships, patience with difficult people, you look around the modern world and you feel completely, utterly alone.
You feel like a sucker, honestly. Like the whole system is rigged against you.
Why am I the only one not cutting corners? Why am I the only one not cheating when everyone else is getting ahead?
Exactly.
And this verse answers that exact feeling of isolation. It says, you are not alone. You are standing in a magnificent line that stretches all the way back through human history. A line filled with prophets, the most truthful people, martyrs, and the quietly righteous. You are in the absolute best company imaginable. You might feel alone in your office cubicle or in your neighborhood, but in the unseen spiritual reality, you are part of a massive crowd of the best human beings who ever lived.
And the actual structure of the verse itself reflects that balance. The commentators call it a sandwich structure. It starts positive, then it goes negative. And that framing is really interesting.
It starts with the ultimate model. Those favored. That is the firm anchor. Only then does it move into the negative warnings. This is deep, profound educational wisdom. We have to build our core identity primarily on who we actively want to be the positive role models. We shouldn't just build our identity on who we hate or what we fear.
Right. It's a definition based on pursuing light, not just fleeing darkness. We aren't defined merely by what we aren't. We are defined by what we are chasing.
But we still absolutely need those shadows to see the light clearly. The reflection we're exploring uses this powerful metaphor of shadows that I really appreciate. It posits that we are always, at every moment, living under a shadow. We are either walking under the cooling shadow of grace, the suffocating shadow of anger, or the confusing shadow of being lost. We are never existing in a moral vacuum.
That's such a powerful visual to carry with you. There is no neutral ground. Your daily actions are constantly casting a shadow over your life and the lives around you.
And that shadow dictates the fundamental quality of your existence. Is it a protective, nourishing shadow of divine grace? Or is it the harsh, blistering heat of anger and confusion?
We're coming up to the end of the surah now. This is the final verse. And there's a really moving reflection regarding this idea of the ending as a beginning. Al-Fatiha, this monumental opening chapter, ends with a request. It ends with a plea.
It doesn't end with a period. It ends with an open hand. The believer doesn't finish the surah, wipe their hands, and say, okay, I am guided, done, check that spiritual box for the day. They finish the entire recitation by fiercely asking to be guided.
And that specific posture keeps the heart incredibly vigilant. It prevents that exact spiritual complacency we were warning about earlier.
Because it connects right back to humility.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how much you know, it doesn't matter how many books you've read or how straight your path has been up to this exact second. You are always desperately in need of future guidance.
You're always just one bad decision away from slipping.
Exactly. So the request must be continuous. It's a dynamic living state, not a static status that you achieve and put on a shelf.
So the mindset isn't, I am guided. It's, please keep guiding me. The notes we've been working from summarize the balance of the ideal human character perfectly here. I want to read this list because it really brings the whole verse together for me. It says the ideal character described in this single verse does three things. Number one, They hope by constantly asking for grace. Number 2, they are humble by acknowledging God as the sole source of that favor. And number 3, they are vigilant by deeply fearing the paths of anger and loss.
That right there is a complete, perfectly calibrated psychological ecosystem. Hope is what keeps you moving forward. Humility is what keeps you grounded in reality. And vigilance is what keeps you safe from the cliffs on either side. If you lose any one of those 3 elements, you inevitably fall off the path.
If you have all the hope in the world but absolutely no vigilance, you just become reckless.
And if you have extreme vigilance but 0 hope, you just become completely paralyzed by fear and anxiety.
And if you somehow have both of those but absolutely no humility, you become an arrogant tyrant.
Exactly. The balance is the absolute masterpiece of this verse. It balances the human psyche perfectly on the razor's edge between fear and hope, between our own human effort and our total reliance on the divine.
So as we wrap up this incredibly deep reflection on verse 7, and really on this entire surah as a whole, what does all this actually mean for us today, right now, as we go back to our lives? The reflection leaves us with some pretty intense provocations to think about.
It really asks us to audit our lives. How do we measure grace or blessing right now? Is it exclusively by our bank accounts and our job titles? Or is it by our actual ability to remain just, honest, and merciful in a very difficult, very compromised world? It actively challenges our entire cultural definition of success.
And it forces us to ask, are we drifting? Are we currently on the path of the lost simply because we're exhausted and just following the cultural trends of the day without ever questioning where they lead?
And finally, the most important question. Are we actively seeking to be among those favored? Are we purposely looking for that righteous company? And are we aggressively trying to embody those difficult qualities of truth, courage, and character? It's a daily, sometimes hourly check-in. The recitation of this verse isn't just a ritual, it's a complete realignment of your internal compass. It forces you to pull up the map and say, okay, honestly, where am I really standing right now?
And to add one final thought for you to mull over think about the shadows we were just talking about. If this path is fundamentally defined by human behavior, by mimicking those who are favored, then the shadow you are casting right now is becoming the path for someone else. Your children, your friends, your coworkers, they are watching you. If you are the person they're imitating, where exactly are you leading them?
That's a heavy question to walk away with.
That's it for this episode of Insights.
If you found this reflection helpful, follow the show and join us next time as we continue verse by verse in the Qur'an.
Until then, take one idea from this verse into your day.